What up guys, Bakchis here. As promised, on this episode, I'm gonna go over some of the comments that you guys left on my previous episodes. And I'm gonna pick and choose the questions that I feel like are interesting and also the questions that just keep popping up over and over again. So I won't be able to get to all of them, but let's jump right in and get to the interesting ones and the ones that keep popping up. Okay, first question that I saw come up, and I think it came up a few times, is what tire size do I run on the S15? I actually run the same tire size on the S15 as I was running on the S14. The front tires are Falcon 615K plus 265 35/18, so it's a very meaty tire. It's a pretty big tire, but you know, with the Duraflex over fenders, it fits okay. So definitely it takes some effort to get the front tires to clear, but the biggest effort is getting the rear tires to fit. I run a 295 40/18 Falcon 615K plus, and these are super meaty. This is a big tire, makes a lot of grip, and that's just what we need with how much power we make and for how fast everyone is going these days in Formula D. So big tires on a fairly lightweight car, but that's what makes it super fun. This is a very cool question because it's got a very cool answer. So the question is, why the roof vent on my cars? So the S14's got one, and so does the S15. On both of my cars, I have side windows. That means that the cabin of the car is completely sealed. And in order to ensure that smoke doesn't enter the cabin, I try to generate some positive cabin pressure. And in order to do that, I installed the roof vent on my cars. It's open at all times, so while I'm traveling at a decent speed, it's actually rushing air into the cabin, and that's creating some positive pressure. If you don't have positive pressure inside the cab, I notice that smoke tends to start seeping in through any little crack or little hole that you might have in the floorboard, in the firewall, or just basically if anything's not sealing 100%. And we all know every single car is not sealed 100%. It's just things breathe. So a little bit of positive cabin pressure is always a great way to keep the smoke from entering inside of the vehicle. Accu sump plumbing. I think that's a great question because LS motors that are not dry sump should really be running an Accu sump. And I went over some parts of the Accu sump plumbing in my previous episode, but now that everything's in the car, let's get to it. Let's go from the back of the car all the way to the front and trace all those lines and show you exactly how the Accu sump is plumbed in. Let's get this thing up in the air. All right, so the Accu sump is mounted in the back of the car, right next to the radiator, and we basically run a 90 right out of the Accu sump, and this line goes to the front of the car. Another cool thing that's going on back here is we use Accu sump's cable that comes as an option to manually operate a ball valve. So yeah, I'm running a manual ball valve. I just love having that manual control of it. The cable runs into the inside of the car, and the lever for me to actuate the Accu sump is right to the right of the driver's seat. So here's the line, once again, that's running out of the Accu sump, and how convenient the transmission and the drive shaft is out. But here's the line, so you can literally just trace it, and it goes right into the engine bay over there. I try not to run it near the headers or anything, just so that way I don't have to fiddle with it if I'm pulling the trans in and out, and the heat and all that stuff is out of the way. So it's going into the engine bay. Here's the Accu sump line, and here's the important part. It goes in and it tees into the oil system. I teed it into the line that comes out of the oil cooler, and this line is going back into the motor. So it came out of the oil pump into the oil filter, then from the oil filter into the oil cooler, and then the Accu sump line tees into the line that's going straight back into the motor from the oil cooler. This is really important. This is a one-way valve, and if you don't have this one-way valve in, as soon as you actuate the actual Accu sump, it would allow oil to basically bleed back into the oil cooler, the oil filter, into the oil pump that is probably starving of oil. That's why the Accu sump's activated. So you want it to not go into that area. You want it to go directly into the block and keep oil pressure in all your bearings and cam bearings, all the journals, and that one-way valve is like a big piece of the puzzle that you must have. So all this stuff, including the ball valve, the cable for the ball valve, the one-way valve, even a lot of the miscellaneous fittings came directly from Canton Racing. They're the manufacturers of the Accu sump. I also run a Canton Racing oil pan. It all works together very well, and it's like a one-stop shop. If you want to get an Accu sump, plumbing, and all those accessories, go there. Don't forget the one-way valve when you put an Accu sump in. What am I doing with the S14.5? This thing has honestly been sitting since Irwindale, but it's been a really great baseline while building the S15. And honestly, I want to keep the S14 around as long as I can, because I think it's a very competitive, great backup car. And honestly, I just love the thing, and it's in race trim, ready to rock, and it just feels great having something that I worked so hard on and I've had for so long. Obviously had a ton of memories with this car. I definitely want to keep it around as long as I can. Can you do a tour of all of your drift cars? Absolutely. I think that would be a really fun video. I think one video per one car would probably be the best way to do it, but we'll probably start out with the Hyundai Genesis, because I've been asked that question quite a few times, and I know you Hyundai Genesis fans out there would love to see the breakdown of the Arc Performance AR1 is what we call it, the Hyundai Genesis that I competed at, and I'd love to go through that car. I'll make time for it, I promise, and we'll get to it, and we'll knock out all the drift cars, because I think it'd be super fun to go over all of them. What do we data log during an FD weekend? That's a great question. We actually data log absolutely everything. It's just kind of auto-programmed to start recording at a minimum vehicle speed. So that way, if I have any weird glitch during a run, I could go back and check any given data log and see what it is that happened. I rarely look at a lot of the data. We let all the sensors that come out of the ECU go into the race pack dash. It's data logged in the race pack dash. And we also have signals from the shock sensors that go into that race pack dash. Tire temperature goes into the race pack dash. Basically, as much data as I can get out of the car, it's all being recorded. And I rarely go back to look at it, but it's all there in case we have questions after a practice session, or maybe even after the weekend itself. Sometimes I'm picking my brain as to why the car did a certain thing, and sometimes I can't tell as a driver what went wrong, so sometimes I have to refer to that data. Why not a sequential transmission in the S15? And that makes total sense. I'm building it from scratch, might as well run a sequential, right? Well, I love the way sequentials feel when I drive them. They feel great and awesome, but I've been running a 4-speed dog box in all my cars, and I've actually invested into quite a few Andrews 431A transmissions, and that means I have a spare, and I also have one in the S14, also one in my demo car. So if I am in a pinch or I damage the spare, I could always borrow one from any one of those cars. Here's one of the transmissions out on the table right now, replacing some bearings in it. So as you can tell, I am familiar of how to maintain them. They're very easy to work on. They're very affordable. And for now, I'm gonna stick to that. Maybe in the next coming season, I'll switch to a sequential. But at this moment in time, there were so many new things about the new car. This was one thing that I already knew, I already had spares of. It just seemed like a no-brainer to stick with the 4-speed dog box that I've been so used to for at least one more season. How often should you rebuild your 441 feel coilovers? That's a great question, because it not only applies to feel suspension coilovers, I think it applies to most of the monotube high performance shocks that you might put on your race car. On a race car, I typically say rebuild it at least once a season, because you never know if there's anything slightly bent or wearing abnormally because of the elements that we put our race cars through. We go off track sometimes, we bump into each other, and it's just not a normal type of wear on a shock. There's always abnormal things that happen on the track. So to be safe, get them rebuilt once a season. If you're just having fun with your car and you're not taking it super seriously, you're not, competing, then we say every 20,000 miles. And most of our customers don't even send them in to get rebuilt every 20,000 miles. There's a lot more miles that people are putting on them. But if you want to keep it fresh and you want to keep it consistent, I'd say every 20,000 miles. How did I make my S15 left-hand drive? That's a great question. And it's kind of gone through in some of the previous episodes, but let me go through it real quick since the car's all the way together and you can kind of see the way everything works now. So originally the steering column came through the right side of the firewall, right over here somewhere. We plated all that off. Now we're using this area for plumbing, for wiring bulkheads. And now the steering shaft comes through the right or the left side, just like my S14. Here's an aftermarket steering shaft. It goes right to the OEM steering rack that's underneath all this. Let me show you inside the car what we did. So just got rid of the whole OEM steering column and we mounted up a lightweight collapsible Woodward steering column, and here it is right here. This thing basically hangs off the dash bar that's right underneath the dashboard itself. It ties into the roll cage here, and here's a nice clamp. This is able to adjust up and down. You could also scoot it in and out literally by loosening these clamps. So super stoked on that, the way it came out. Also mated NRG quick release to the Woodward steering column. NRG is manufacturing basically an adapter from Woodward to NRG. Look for that on their website pretty soon. And really stoked on the way this thing came out, on the seating position. And what ties everything together and finishes it off nicely is this Monster Service carbon fiber dashboard. This thing's super light. It looks amazing. The detail on it is really nice. Everything's rounded off perfectly. And what's cool about it is it's meant for a race car, so it is narrower. Typically there's an air vent here on the S15s, but they took all that out. They narrowed it up, knowing that there's going to have to be clearance for a roll cage. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have more questions, please comment below, and don't forget to subscribe.